Chap- Chapter 4. With growing excitement, Molly walked back through the streets of Briarsville and across the fields to the orphanage. It was only tea time, but already the gray November light was fading. Pheasants chirruped loudly in the woods as they settled to roost, and rabbits darted for cover as Molly walked by. When she arrived at Hardwick House, the windows of the stone building were already aglow from lights within. Molly could make out, behind the thin curtain in the second-floor window, the wizened silhouette of Miss Adderstone, as she petted her bad-tempered pug dog, Tula. Molly smiled to herself and pushed open the iron gates. As she walked across the gravel, the side door of the orphanage opened. It was Miss Trinklebury. She threw her plump arms around Molly and hugged her. "Oh, hello, Molly Puppet. You're back. At least I didn't miss you completely. How are you? All right?" "Yeah, just about," said Molly, giving her a hug back. Molly would have loved to tell Miss Trinklebury about the book, but she decided it was better not to. "How are you?" "Oh, good as ever. Look, I saved you a cake." Miss Trinkleberry reached into her flowery knitting bag and rummaged about. "Here you go," she said, passing Molly a wax paper package. "It's a chocolate cupcake, made some last night." The glass in her spectacles flashed as they caught the light coming from the hall. "But don't let Miss You-Know-Who catch you with it." "Oh, thank you," said Molly appreciatively. "Must be going now, dear," she said, pulling her old crotcheted coat tightly around her. "Keep warm, Chuck. See you in a week." With that, Miss Trinklebury set off for town, and Molly went inside. She nipped up to her bedroom, and since everyone else at tea, had time to eat her cupcake. She hid the book under her mattress. Then she went down to the dining room and sat by herself at the small table by the fireplace. Molly usually had tea with Rocky, but he wasn't there. She ate her bread and margarine, warily watching Hazel at the large end on the other side of the room. She was showing off that she'd won the cross-country race. Her beefy legs were covered in mud. Her big face was still red from all that exertion. Molly knew that when Hazel saw her alone, a bullying session would begin. Hazel would make a few vicious comments, and Molly would pretend not to care. Hazel's taunts would become more malicious until she pierced Molly's shell. Molly might blush, or her face might twitch, or worse, she might get a lump in her throat and her eyes might water. Quickly, Molly stuffed the last of her bread into her mouth and prepared to leave. But she was too late. Hazel shouted, "Look, everybody! Zoto's finally made it! Did you fall in a puddle, Drono? Or was a frog in your path that frightened you? Or did your weird, spammy legs snap?" Molly smiled sarcastically, trying to shake the insults off. "Is that supposed to be a cool smile?" asked Hazel with a sneer. "Look, everybody! Bog Eyes is trying to look cool." Molly hated Hazel, although she hadn't always. Hazel had arrived at the orphanage 4 years ago, aged 8. Her bankrupt parents had been killed in a car crash, leaving her nothings, not even relations. And so, alone and destitute, she'd been sent to Hardwick House. Molly had done her best to make Hazel feel welcome, but very soon she realized that Hazel didn't want her friendship. Hazel had pushed Molly up against the wall and explained to her that she was better than her. She had known a wonderful family life, and she remembered her parents. She hadn't been dropped like rubbish on a doorstep. She'd come here with a tragic twist of fate had killed her loving parents, and ever since then Hazel had teased, taunted, and bullied Molly. "I said, is that supposed to be a cool smile?" repeated Hazel. "Maybe a farmer attacked her because she looks like a bog-eyed rat," suggested skinny Robert Fidgeman. He was Hazel's informant, her spy. As Molly looked at him in his crisp white shirt and his tidy hair, she thought he looked like a shrunken adult. His sharp nose and cold, spying eyes were always sinister. "Or maybe a rat attacked her because her sweaty hands stink so much," piped up muscly Gordon Boyles. He had tattooed each of his fingers using a compass and ink. The fingers on his left fist read Gourd, and the fingers on his right hand read King. From where she was sitting, Molly could just read King Gourd. As Gordon took a bite of his tea cake, Molly was reminded of his trademark trick of taking a fresh slice of bread and blowing his nose in it. making what he called a snot sandwich, which he'd then eat. Or did Rocky and you sit in bushes planning your wedding? Jibed Hazel. All at once, Molly smiled. It was a smile that came from an excitement about her, and from the hopes already kindled in her about what she could be able to do if she learned to hypnotize people. Hazel and her posse just better watch out. Without a word, Molly stood up and left the room. After tea, all the children had to rest on their beds, except for those who were allowed to practice their acts for the Briarsville Children's Talent Competition. Molly was itching to read the hypnotism book, but couldn't risk it, as Cynthia was reading a comic on the bed beside her. The minutes crawled by. Molly heard Rocky's husky voice, but she still felt angry about what he said, so she didn't go and see him. Then came homework hour. It felt like homework year. Miss Adderstone's cuckoo clock struck 6. At assembly, Molly ignored Rocky, and so Rocky ignored Molly. After singing a hymn to tape-recorded organ music, Miss Adderstone, and with Petulio yapping under her arm, made some announcements. The first that was that Molly would be on vacuuming duty for the week since she had failed to complete the cross-country race. The second was that some American visitors were coming the next day. They will be arriving at 4 o'clock. May I remind you that they are interested in adopting one of you, strangely enough. If you remember, the last Americans to come here left empty-handed. Do not let me down this time. I'd like to get rid of one of you at least. They wouldn't be interested in adopting dirty, flea-bitten rat runts. Miss Adderstone's eyes hovered on Molly. So clean up. Only a respectable child will be chosen. Some of you, of course, don't need to be told this. Every child in the room felt excited when they heard this news. Molly even detected a glimmer of hope in Hazel's eyes. At supper, Molly sat by herself, eating a bruised apple. When, finally, when thought she was about to explode from curiosity, she found a moment when the bedroom was empty. Quickly taking the book from her mattress, she hid it in her laundry bag and set off for the laundry rooms. Hades means hell in Greek. Hades was the orphanage name for the laundry rooms, which were deep in the bowels of the building. Molly made her way down to them now, looking as if she was off to do some washing. The cellar was dark and musty, with low ceilings. The walls were lined with dusty pipes that hung with drying clothes. At the far ends were some old porcelain sinks, with limescale-covered plug holes where the children washed their dirty clothes. Molly found a warm spot under a light bulb, below some drying pipes, and bursting with anticipation, she reached inside her laundry bag. All her life, Molly had yearned to be special. She'd fantasized that she was special, and somehow something miraculous would happen to her. Deep down inside, she felt that one day a brilliant Molly Moon would burst out and show everyone at Hardwick House that she really was a somebody. Yesterday, she thought something important was going to happen. Maybe the important thing was one day late. All evening, Molly had wondered whether this book was going to make her dreams come true. So it was with trepidation and a timid hand that she slowly lifted the dry leather cover of the old book. It opened with a creak. There was the first page again. Hypnotism, an art explained. Molly turned to the next page, where what she read made her tingle from head to toe. Dear reader, welcome to the wonderful world of hypnotism, and congratulations for making the wise decision to open this book. You are about to depart on an incredible journey. If you will put into practice the following nuggets of wisdom, you will find that the world is beyond full of golden opportunities. Bon voyage and bonne chance. Sincerely, Dr. H. Logan, Ryersville, February 3rd, 1908. Molly noticed with amazement that Dr. Logan had come from Blyersville. This was extraordinary, as sleepy Blyersville didn't have many interesting people to boast about. She eagerly turned the page. Introduction. You have probably heard often enough about the ancient art of hypnotism. Perhaps you have seen a performing hypnotist in a traveling fair, hypnotizing members of the audience, getting them to behave in peculiar ways and amusing spectators. Maybe you have read statements how people have been hypnotized for operations so that they feel no pain. Hypnotism is a great art form, and like other art forms, hypnotism is something that most people can learn if they are patient and practice hard. A few students of hypnotism will have a natural talent, even fewer will have a real gift. Will you be one of the gifted few? Read on. Molly's hands began to sweat. Hypnotism, the book read, was given its name by the ancient Greek hypnos, means sleep in Greek. Hypnotists have practiced since the earliest times. Hypnotism is also known as mesmerism, a word that comes from the name of a doctor called Franz Mesmer. He was born in 1734 and died in 1815, and his chief pursuit in life was the art of hypnotism. When a person is under the powers of a hypnotist, he is in a trance. People go into trances all the time without realizing it. When you put your pen down, for instance, and 1 minute later can't remember where you put it, you can't remember because you were in a small trance. Daydreaming is another form of entering a trance. People daydreaming are in a world of their own, and when they come out of their daydream trance, they often don't know what people around them have been saying or doing. In trances, people's thoughts float away from the noisy world into the quieter places of the mind. Molly thought of a trick she had learned, of drifting off into space and looking down at the world, of turning herself off when people were shouting at her. Maybe, without knowing it, she had been putting herself into a trance. The book continued. Our minds like to relax in this way, as a rest from thinking. Trances are very normal things. When Molly read the next second sentence, her heart skipped a beat. If you are good at going into trances, the chances are you will be very good at hypnotism. Hungrily she read on. What a hypnotist does is bring people into trances, and then keep them there by talking to them in a hypnotic way. When the person is in a deep trance, a sort of wide awake sleep, the hypnotist can then suggest things that the person should think or do. For example, the hypnotist might say, when you wake up, you will not want to smoke another pipe. Or, when you wake up, you will no longer feel afraid of riding in automobiles. Molly put the book down for a moment. Or, she thought aloud, when you wake up, you will think you are a monkey. Molly smiled as ideas began to jostle through her head. Then a shiver of suspicion stopped her in her tracks. Was this book for real? Or was it written by a madman? She then remembered the warthoggy man in the library. He said he traveled all the way from America just to find this book. The professor must believe that the secrets contained between its covers are extremely valuable. It must be very, very special. Perhaps, Molly said to herself, perhaps she chanced upon a real treasure. Eagerly she looked at the table of contents. Chapter 1. Practice on yourself. Chapter 2. Hypnotizing animals. Chapter 3. Hypnotizing others. Chapter 4. Pendulum hypnosis. Chapter 5. Hypnotizing small groups of people. Chapter 6, How to Hypnotize a Crowd. Chapter 7, Hypnotizing Using the Voice Alone. Chapter 8, Long Distance Hypnosis. And Chapter 9, Amazing Feats of Hypnosis. The book was peppered with drawings of hypnotized people in embroidered clothes. There was a picture of a woman lying flat with only a chair under her head and one under her feet. She was called the human plank. There were lots of diagrams of a man making strange faces, one a puffed up blowfish face, another where his eyes were turned upwards, showing their whites. Yuck! Disgusting, Molly thought, as she turned the thick pages of the heavy old book. Molly came to the end of chapter 6 and realized it was immediately followed by chapter 9. Two chapters, chapter 7, Hypnotizing Using the Voice Alone, and chapter 8, Long Distance Hypnosis, had been carefully removed. Molly wondered who'd taken the pages and whether they'd gone missing 2 years ago or only recently. It was impossible to tell. Near the end of the book was a brownish photograph. It was a man with curly hair and glasses and a bulbous nose. Dr. Logan, the world's most famous hypnotist, it said underneath. Molly was relieved to see that you obviously didn't need to be good looking to be a good hypnotist. Eagerly, she flicked back to the first chapter. Practice on yourself. The first section was voice. It read, a hypnotist voice must be calm, gentle, lulling. like a mother's hand rocking a baby to sleep. So the hypnotist's voice must lull the subject into a trance. This sounded too good to be true. Molly had been labeled with the nickname Drono because people had said her voice made them want to go to sleep. Now this ability, instead of being something to be ashamed of, felt like a talent to boast about. The book went on. Here are some exercises which must be said slowly and steadily. Practice them. Molly read those sentences out loud. I have a wonderful, calm voice. I am calm and persuasive. My my voice is very. All of a sudden, she heard loud steps. She shut the book quickly and slipped it into her laundry bag. Hazel was coming into Hades. She stepped noisily into the pipe room with her tap shoes still on. Ugh, she said. What are you doing here, weirdo? I heard you try to sing. Give up. Your voice is flat. Just singing while I find my socks. More like you're down here thinking about how everybody dislikes you. Hazel collected her clothes from a pipe and turned to look at Molly. You're like a sock, aren't you, Jono? A worn out, stinking, unwanted, weird sock. Why don't you enter the talent competition as a sock? When Molly didn't react, Hazel added, or better still, enter as the ugliest person in the world. I bet your parents were ugly, bog eyes. With a satisfied smirk, she turned and walked away. Molly watched her go. She smiled to herself, and under her breath she said, Just you wait, Hazel Hackersley. Just you wait. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 4. Here's what I'm thinking about that chapter. She is definitely the hypnotist now. There's no way. She was built for it. But that makes you think, how easy is it to become a hypnotist? In the book, in the book, when Molly was reading the book, it said that if you have a lulling voice, you are probably really good at hypnotism. But is that it? I've also never met anyone who has a lulling voice before. I don't know. I feel like something's kind of sketchy. Okay, here's my prediction. I predict that Molly is going to learn hypnotism, become an amazing hypnotist, and here's what she's gonna do. She's gonna hypnotize Rocky into liking her again, and then at the end, it's gonna be a point of guilt. Like, does he like me, or is it only because I hypnotized him? Oh, I feel so guilty. Oh, it's so horrible, and it's just gonna be a big problem later on. But yeah, she's gonna learn hypnotism, and she's going to become a great hypnotist.